Happy Wednesday, everyone. I'll get started in just a minute. Thank you so much for being here. We're at the top of the hour, so I'm going to get started soon. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to let just a couple moments pass while we wait for the late arrivals to come. But we'll get started soon. My name is Laura Nelson. I'm an MBA admissions consultant with TTP. I'm dialing in from the Denver Metro. Could you share in the chat where you are joining from? Awesome. We are coast to coast here, DC, Chicago, Vegas, New York City. That's great. Welcome. Thanks for sharing that. And thank you for joining us for the Ultimate MBA Application Roadmap webinar. So this is the first of 4 sessions that I will be delivering this spring that focus on facets of your MBA application journey. So some sessions are specialized for certain groups of applicants and some are for everyone, like tonight's session. So we are going to tackle the Ultimate MBA Application Roadmap. And this is great for anyone who's planning to apply in this upcoming MBA application season, particularly if you are aiming for round 1. So I am going to talk you through some of the key components of the MBA application process, really emphasizing what you can be doing now to set your strategy and your plan. I'm also going to highlight some key milestones to reach in the coming months so that you can position yourself effectively for target MBA programs, again, in round 1, but you can also modify this plan to meet round 2 deadlines as well. So if you're here today, you're in a good spot. In fact, most of my successful clients start early and work on this process for several months. If you're planning to apply this fall, you're taking the right step to create winning MBA applications. So let's dive into today's agenda. So here are the things that I plan to cover. First, I'll give you a little background on who I am and where I come from. Next, I'll give you a high-level overview of what that MBA application roadmap looks like, starting with where we are today and then branching out over the next few months. There are the activities that you can be doing now, and I'm going to hone in on those today. So they include evaluating your profile, planning your career goals, and researching your target MBA programs. Then I'm going to provide an overview of what you can do to diagnose and address any perceived weaknesses in your candidacy. So believe it or not, you still have time to address those. And the earlier you spot them, the easier it is to make a plan to address those. And then finally, I am going to leave time at the end for Q&A. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat as we go along here, but if I miss your question, please ask it again at the end. I will allow a few minutes to make that happen. So let's start about me. Before we get to the meat of the agenda, I'll tell you a little more about myself. Again, my name is Laura Nelson. I have a BFA from Carnegie Mellon University, where I studied art. I'm also a full-time grad of Ross School of Business, where I got an MBA at the University of Michigan. I was a member of the admissions committee, and I had a very nonlinear career path going into school and coming out. So before B school, I worked in film and television. And then after B school, I went into tech, and I guess that was a little more conventional, but I kind of had this weird path through general management to marketing. I most recently was VP of marketing at a software startup and still am active as a fractional marketing exec. And thankfully, the last couple of companies I was at exited through acquisition. But alongside this, I've also been an MBA admissions consultant for the last 15 years with two of the top firms and now with UTB. So I'm really excited to bring some of the insights that I've learned over the years to you tonight. So over the last 15 years, I've worked on almost every program imaginable, including full-time, part-time, online, executive, and dual degree options at programs like these on this slide and many others that are not on this list. I would say I work with two distinct client groups. The first would be those from traditional business backgrounds who leverage my expertise to stand out in a competitive process. And the second group is people kind of like me from non-traditional backgrounds who leverage my guidance to demonstrate that an MBA is right for them and makes sense for them at this juncture in their careers. So with that, a couple of people getting a little feedback on the noise or on the mic rather. So I hope that gives you a sense of where I'm coming from. I'll pause here and I'm just curious to see who's in the room tonight. Could you share what you're doing now and what you hope to be doing post MBA? I'll leave you a moment to do so in the chat.
Mierda. Mierda, mira la frente de esta tipa, man. La frente más grande que he visto en mi vida.
Use the chat, that would be great. So let's see, product manager, moving into consulting, portfolio management ops, pivoting into IBPE, great. Finance to entrepreneurship, awesome. Nice mix here of like traditional and a little non-traditional. Army officer to marketing, great. Thank you for your service. Nice mix of backgrounds here. And I think it really underscores the versatility of the MBA, right? I'm seeing hospitality in here, fintech, PE, entrepreneurship, in addition to the ones I mentioned. There's a lot of places that you can take this degree. So I hope you're excited for those possibilities. Let's move into the meat of the agenda today. The questions that we're really trying to help solve with this MBA roadmap are the following, right? You might be wondering, what can I be doing in the next few months to prepare for round 1 or round 2 deadlines, right? We're hoping to answer the question of how you can strengthen your profile. We'll talk about how you can approach networking and how you can position your work experience and how you can develop your personal value proposition. And then finally, I'm going to talk about researching programs because I think this is a great time where you can start to shortlist MBA programs. So I'm not going to give you all the answers today, but hopefully it is, an order of operations and a framework for thinking and, a timeline for scheduling all of the activities that go into this MBA application process. So I'm going to fill out this page shortly, but here are the areas we're going to focus on now. And the reason that I emphasize these activities is that we are still waiting for the MBA applications to go live for next season, right? You might be able to see some of the applications are still live from the current season for round 3 or 4 deadlines. And while that might be useful, we don't know for sure that the applications will remain the same. So I really recommend that people wait until we see exactly what is in front of us for the next season, because these essay topics, they do change. Some of the requirements change. So I think it is premature to jump into those tactics when you can be doing a lot of other activities and really setting the strategic framework in a few of these areas, right? They include evaluating your profile, diagnosing and addressing weaknesses, researching post-MBA careers, right? This is a big one, particularly for those of you who are career switchers. So this lays a strong foundation. Once you get this dialed in, once you understand your transferable skills and can articulate that goal in the short and long term, that makes it so much easier to address that as part of your application essays. And then finally, we will be talking about identifying target programs, right? That's going to require some research and some other activities along with networking to, help create that short list. So you may be wondering, what does the rest of this roadmap look like for the coming months? If you plan ahead, you can pace yourself through all of these activities. And, this is just a suggestion to round one. But if you are applying in round one, take a screenshot of this page, right? This is a way that you can move with intention, through the activities and ensure that you are not scrambling late August, early September for those round one deadlines, right? Rushing is never a good idea. And, this is a huge investment of your time and your money. And you want to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward in all of these activities that comprise the MBA application process. So great question in the chat. This is assuming the GMAT has been taken. The reason that I do not include the tests here is because it is different for everyone, right? You might have taken your test or you might still be studying for your test. I work with candidates who are, in different modes, right? So this schedule kind of omits the tests from the, from the planning for round one, but if you have not taken your tests, of course, you have to plan for that as well. What I recommend that candidates do is, allow yourself time for a second or third attempt. And, I know that sounds daunting if you haven't taken the test yet for the first time, but, you want to make sure that you have a contingency plan and again, are putting your best scores forward for the most competitive programs. So glad you asked that. Great question. So tonight I'm going to really focus on what's in this yellow box here, starting with what you can be doing now, particularly evaluating your profile. And I'm going to do it through the lens of the MBA admissions committee, right? And how your candidacy is evaluated. So you may have heard this already, but admissions officers take a holistic approach to evaluating your application. This is an art and a science. So unfortunately, there's no one formula that you all can follow and guarantee admission into your top program. So part of this art and science is that your MBA admissions committees are looking at your past achievements and your potential in three general areas. So they include your academic capabilities, they include your professional potential, so what you've achieved and what you can and will do next. And they also include your personal narrative. This can include your extracurriculars, volunteering, and how those will take shape in the future, but also kind of your broader life story. So these facets of who you are and can and will be expressed in numerous ways throughout your MBA application. So let's take a look at these one by one. So starting with academic capabilities, when an admissions officer evaluates your academic capabilities, they want to understand, can you handle the rigor of the program, particularly quant? And also understand what is your experience and performance with quant and analytical topics, right? In an academic setting or professionally or otherwise. And you really need to demonstrate that you can handle the work. And, here are some of the key areas where this is expressed in your MBA application, right? It's going to be your transcripts, supplemental coursework if you need it. It's going to be your test scores. And of course, like you can express quant capabilities in other areas of your application as appropriate, right? So there are many areas where this can come to light It will depend on the application, the nature of the questions asked, et cetera. But I think the resume is a nice and easy one to get started with to start expressing these capabilities, right? This will be different for everyone. It might be easier for those who have a more quant or analytical job, and less easy for people like me who are coming from a non-traditional background. But the goal here really is to say, can you handle the work, and how is that demonstrated in your application? So you want to, evaluate your profile, right? Like, will you be able to check this box? And if not, we'll have a diagnosis for you that I can talk about in a few minutes. Professional potential, right? So when an admissions committee member evaluates your professional potential, they want to understand what you've done in the past, right? How you've driven impact to date. Also where you have demonstrated leadership, and take note that leadership is not necessarily just being the boss or leading the team. There are different ways that this can be expressed. And really want to understand, how they relate to your future career goals. These can be expressed in, a number of areas in your application. And again, you will be strategic depending on the application that is. But I talk about potential here a lot because there is this balance between the past and the future. So admissions committees know that, most candidates are kind of 4 to 6 years into their careers. Like, they've gotten a start, but, most of your future is ahead of you. So, they're looking for signs from the past to demonstrate that you will continue to be a successful professional. And again, this is just part of evaluating, where you stand, where your profile stands, before you start creating your actual applications. And the third leg of that stool is the personal narrative, right? This is where you want to start to do some soul searching and think about what makes you different, what makes you unique, and how might that story take shape for the application, right? You don't have to wait for an essay prompt to think about some of these qualities, characteristics, experiences, right? So think about, the key experiences and interests that make you unique. Think about how your experiences have shaped who you are. And then think about how you are going to uniquely contribute to the cohort, right? And again, there are different areas where these will take shape in your application, and you don't have to worry about the tactics now, but I do think it is helpful to think about how you're positioning yourself as a candidate, and how that differentiates you, among a sea of qualified candidates. Again, you are the entity that is going to tie all of these three together. But as you assess, where you stand with, your test scores, with your undergrad performance, with other things that you have done professionally and outside of work, think about, how you're filling in these areas and presenting a story of, who you are holistically to that admissions committee. So I know that's a lot, right? That is the first area of, just determining where you are. I am going to move into career planning because a lot of you have talked about being career switchers, and that is generally the case, right? A lot of people go to an MBA to switch careers, and some people go to an MBA to accelerate the trajectory that they're on. And the degree is versatile enough to support the wants and needs of both groups of people. Career planning is important though, and thinking through the logic and the transferable skills and experience is really important. And giving yourself time to do this now as opposed to rushing it later when you're creating application essays will lay a strong foundation and make things easier down the road. I spent a lot of time with my clients here, right? This is a big decision. You are choosing to get off the path that you are on and make an intentional turn, right? You are choosing to do something that, might not make sense for your industry or your current trajectory. So, thinking about why you want to do this and, all the signals that support it, will help lay that strong foundation. So you are already on that path of your pre-MBA career, and you have some key milestones ahead of you with, the MBA, the internship, and that post-MBA job. And, of course, if you zoom out, like this road is longer and more windy. All of that to say, like, you have a long and meaningful journey and career ahead of you. And, this is a very intentional decision to invest in an MBA and to take yourself out of the workforce. So, give your career planning a lot of thought and deliberation. And I'll talk about why this is important, right? Because a lot of people like figure out, sorry, many people figure that, the admin is the toughest part. I talked about that, investment of time and money, and, getting admitted to a top program is a great sign of, the admissions committee's confidence in your career. However, this is just the beginning of that, deviation from the road you're on. Step two is considering where you do your internship. And, a lot of MBA applications ask about this. Internship recruiting starts right when you land on campus. So you've got to be prepared to hit the ground running. And you're gonna lay the foundation for this even before school starts. Step three, of course, is that full-time job you're pursuing post-MBA. And of course, it's one of many jobs. But I want to illustrate here, like, you want to take a long lens on this process. We are not just focused on step one, right? Getting in is just the first step of that major transformation to your career. So again, you are in a great spot now because you have time to think this through and, really put together a solid case and plan for how someone with your background and experiences will be successful in that other career path. I am underscoring here, of course, that, achieving your dream goals doesn't stop or after gaining acceptance. You are really just getting started. And here's why this is important. Again, I talked about career prep starting early. It starts after you accept your offer admission. Like, you can't relax all summer because the career office wants you to be successful and they want you to be prepared for recruiting, because that really does start as soon as you land on campus. Like, recruiters will be there when you're starting school. So a strong understanding of your game plan is really critical. So you need to have that, dialed into the admissions process too, and be on that path when you arrive for day one. So the work, again, I'm glad that people have in this crew have identified what they want to do next. So next, you can go to the next level case building and rationale for why you are choosing that path. And again, that's going to make it all the more easier to write about in your application essays. So that's the second module, the things that you can be doing now. So I talked about, evaluating your profile, talked a little bit about, career planning and why it's so important. Next, I'm going to talk about researching MBA programs, and it's really advantageous to dial into this now, because we still have students who are in school, right? As you attend info sessions, you're going to want to get a little more personalized information from people on your similar career paths, and it's much easier to reach them, while they're in school mode as opposed to while they're doing their summer internships. So take advantage of that attention span, right? Another reason why, it's good to engage with students now is that you are not competing with other students who have put this activity off and are trying to do it in the weeks before the applications are due. So again, don't rush, take your time in networking and laying the foundation for why a program might be a good fit for you. So I'm going to dig into some of the key considerations here when you are evaluating MBA programs. This is a short list. It includes some kind of tactical and holistic objectives, and you might have your own list, right? Take note, I didn't include price or affordability here. All MBA programs are expensive, and this should definitely be consideration, but often you don't have that information on exactly what something's going to cost until the financial aid packages or scholarships have been announced. So, I do encourage people to take that into consideration, but not until they have all of the information in place. So I'm going to walk through how you evaluate, different factors like the ones on the prior slide. Starting with admissibility, it is important to understand whether you fit the key criteria for admission. So in other words, do you have a chance of getting in? So the first place you want to start here is with the class profile. This is not the first and last, but the first place you want to start, right? You can understand, where people have scored on the, GMAT, GRE, how they did in undergrad, what they majored in. It gives you a nice benchmark for, how the most recent class has shaped up. I got a good question here about networking. Is networking with current students a part of the holistic admissions process, or is it more of a suggestion to understand whether a certain program is a good fit for you? So networking on its own, is not going to get you into the program, right? If you talk with 15 Stanford students, that's great, but that on its own is not like a, 5 green flags on your application. I will say though, the information that you glean will help your essays. So, for example, Stanford's current SAB asks, why Stanford? You should have a pretty nuanced understanding of what the program offers and how it's going to benefit your career goals. So, it's going to help you write your essays, but it's also, probably before then too, help you determine rather, whether it is a good program for you. So that's a great question. And, my answer hopefully highlights that you're trying to get a couple things out of those conversations. You're trying to figure out, is it a good fit for me? But also what can I learn about this program that's going to help me with Stanford SAB, with the Fuqua community essay, with the Johnson community essay, with the Wharton community essay. So, keep all of that in mind as you network. And I will touch back on networking in just a few minutes. Another question about the class profile, I think pertinent to this slide and admissibility is, if GPA is the only thing that I don't fit, does that mean I shouldn't apply? So say you have less than average GPA, this example, 3.05 GPA. You understand how averages work, right? So there may very well be people with a low GPA in the class, and this is offset by, someone with a 4.0, right, to reach that 3.7. So all of that to say, say you have a 3.05 for Wharton, and we're looking at the class of 2026 here, you got to really knock it out of the park on the test, right? That's a general recommendation I would make if I had this quick information now. I would have to get a little more in the details to understand, your entire profile to say this is worth applying here or not. But generally, if you're low in one area, try to over-index in the other area. That's a very quick take, but good question. And thanks for asking it. Another key consideration here as you're evaluating the right programs for you is the professional goals, right? You have to make sure that the programs that you're targeting can help you reach that goal in consulting, banking, marketing, whatever the case may be. The place to start, and this is not start and finish again, is the employment report. This is going to give you a snapshot of how the last class did with placements. I only have the first page here, but it will be broken down by function, industry. It will show who had offers and accepted them by graduation, and then the same metrics 3 or 6 months out following graduation. I think this is a good tool, but I do recommend you go beyond this by learning about the career office resources, talking with students. Because let's face it, like a lot of schools struggled last year. The job market has been tough. And some people are trying to make decisions based on 1 year of data. But the reality is that you are graduating, 2, 3 years from now, right? And you don't know what the market and the economy is going to look like then, right? So my recommendation is like use that as a guide, understand, what's beneath the surface and whether that program has strong relationships in your industry of choice with the companies you're interested in, but go beyond that report because things will change. Like look for trends over time, right? Look at 5 years of career reports, but do not get too fixated on last year's numbers. So let's shift gears here. Like we talked about, the class profile employment report. You also want to make sure that the curriculum and the programming supports your goals, right? So you'll be looking at the core curriculum. You'll be looking at electives. I think the website's a great place to start, but you're going to supplement your information by learning more about professors, talking with students, and networking with alums. So start with the website, but move beyond that too, right? If you're interested in Fuqua, they do this nice job of laying out, the curriculum versus the concentrations versus experiential learning versus international opportunities. So, this is a great place to start and understand, right? Like if you are interested in a particular area, does a program like Fuqua make sense for you, from a learning perspective? That's got to tie in, of course, to the recruiting as well. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about culture. Some prospective students are really dialed into this aspect and others are less focused on it, and that's totally okay. But I implore you to think about what type of environment you thrive in and what you desire from that business school experience. So do you want a highly collaborative cohort, or would you be better in a more competitive program and atmosphere? Think about the vibe that you are looking for. And you really need to talk to people to learn more about this, right? So start with info sessions, graduate to coffee chats and one-on-one conversations, and start to learn about, how students work together, right? How they spend their time outside of class. Some students really gravitate toward the teamwork-oriented cultures of Team Fuqua and Kellogg. Others go in another direction, and that's totally okay. So think about that as you talk with administrators, admissions officers, students, and alums too, and ask them to describe it for you and share some examples. Next, let's talk about environment and location. Some candidates think this might be a superficial consideration, but I really think it's important, right? It ties into where you want to spend your life for 2 years, but also, where you see yourself thriving and being happy. I think 2 years is too long to make sacrifices for somewhere like you don't think that you'll be happy or you don't think that you'll do your best work. So think about it, like, do you really like cities? Or are you open to a college town or a rural area? It is totally okay. to have a preference. And it is okay if you don't want to pack up your life for 2 years and move to the woods, like somewhere like Tuck in the middle picture. It's better to know that now than to spend all this time on the application and pay the fee and kind of learn that later, right? So take time to network and learn these environments better. So, attending CBS and Stern in New York it's going to be a different experience than going to the woods in Hanover, New Hampshire, that middle picture. And that's going to be different than going to Westwood in LA and going to Anderson, which is the picture on the right. These all have their pros and cons, and you just have to think about like what works for you, what makes sense for your career. It's not worth it to be miserable for 2 years. And the final key consideration I'll talk about is the alumni network. And the reason I bring this up is that you are going to be an alum for much longer than you're going to be a student, right? So it's important to take a long lens on your decision and really understand how engaged that community is and where it is. So do alums of that program have a strong presence? Are they regionally focused, nationally focused? Do they have a strong international brand? Think about that. Think about what makes sense for you in your career and where it is, right? Um, Learn how active and connected the program's alums are. I think that's really important, right? Especially if you're not, attending or planning to relocate to the nearest city. And, as you do your homework, as you do your outreach, see how willing some of these alums are to take your call. Some are very engaged, some are less engaged. Um, so of course you can do this through alumni outreach, but also, ask about current students' experiences in engaging alums, and then also like dig into some of these, alumni sites and networks online. You can see who's active and who's not, right? And see how often they're hosting events, see how engaged, people are with the content too. A lot of people underestimate this, but the value of the MBA degree is also in the relationships that you make with the people in your cohort and your class, and also that network that you join. So choose wisely. I'm going to take a couple minutes to talk about networking with MBA programs because I know not everyone is coming from the same place, and it's not an easy thing to do, like to talk with strangers, reach out to strangers and ask them for time. I don't love it, and it it is something that I've had to develop a muscle for. So as you learn more about programs, I think admissions events are a great place to start. You can attend virtual events. You can sign up for coffee chats, certain conferences around a subject matter, things like that that are kind of already on the schedule. But as you go deeper into your research, I think that student outreach is really important. Many programs have pages with student ambassadors, people who have raised their hands and volunteered their time to take questions from prospective students like you. So take advantage of that. If you are interested in a particular area, maybe there's a club for it, reach out to club officers, leverage tools like LinkedIn too. There are many ways to identify people who are doing something that you're interested in, to learn more. Then I have some pro tips for engaging one-on-one, because I think this is like can be one of the tougher nuts to crack. My first tip is to ask for 15 minutes of time. I think this is an easy commitment for people to make. And, if you don't specify how long you want or kind of make a vague ask, it's kind of harder for them to commit. So just say like, would love 15 minutes to talk about you and your experiences, right? Which brings me to number two, tee up questions about that person's experience. So if you are picking people who are in the career that you want, who are recruiting in the path that you're interested in, you can learn a lot by asking about their experiences and how they've gone about this process. And I think number three is important too. By centering that conversation, on another person and their experiences and their opinions, you're going to get information that you're not going to get on the website. So even if you're reading about individual students' experiences on the website, it's going to be very sanitized. Like you are looking for the real deal, right? It's not useful to ask like what the average GPA is or average GMAT from the last classes. You can find that online. You are looking for information that you cannot find elsewhere. So you will find in your research that these are often the most valuable touch points that like you can have with the program, and they're going to give you great information on, helping you narrow down your list, but also like answering some of the, why this school type questions, some of those very specific, what are you going to give back to, say, the Fuqua community, right? Or to the Wharton cohort. So I know that's a lot, right? Like we went through very quickly, all of the activities that you can be doing now. And, of course, there's some that are not even on this list, but I think like you can get a lot of bang for your buck on, those 3 bullet points. I want to take just a moment to talk about diagnosing perceived weaknesses, and then, I'll hang out for a couple of minutes and answer questions. So let's talk about these, because it's really important to understand that like not everyone has a perfect GMAT, a perfect GRE, perfect GPA, right? Sometimes there are candidates who can offset, some weakness in some area. And, because you are several months ahead of round 1 deadlines, you still have time to address these. So for example, if you have a low test score, consider taking the test again, right? You have time to offset that low test score. You might even consider taking a different test, right? So say, for example, you keep hitting a wall on the GMAT, consider trying the GRE or EA. Take a practice test beforehand, just try it on and see how it fits with your skills and knowledge. Another one, low GPA. There is not much you can do to rewrite the past, but you can consider developing what we call an alternative transcript. For example, if you have poor grades or you don't have any quant coursework in your background, I highly recommend taking courses to offset that in the form of an alternate transcript. So I often recommend courses like UCLA or UC Berkeley Extension because they're self-paced, they're online, and they're graded. So you can start those early and get an A and just prove that you are serious about the course and you are serious about trying to offset that low GPA. The next categories like few to no volunteer activities or extracurriculars. As I mentioned earlier, the admissions committee is really looking to meet the whole candidate and understand what you have been doing with your life so far, and how you were involved in undergrad or your master's program, if that applies, as a proxy to what you're going to do in school, right? If there's no past evidence of volunteering or extracurriculars in school or after, it will be hard to make the case that you will be very involved on campus, right? So, my recommendation is to, if this is you, you lean into some of your interests. If you still have time to revisit a past volunteer experience or extracurricular activity and step it up. If you think this looks superficial, and I get people say that, like, doesn't that look fake for the application? I still think it is better than having nothing to talk about, right? So do not give it up, but think about what can you be doing the next few months that demonstrates that you do have something to give and you will be active on campus. And if you're hard pressed to find something to get involved with, build on past experiences or interests, right? You might even be able to find something in your workplace. But the reason I bring up the past is like there might be some more continuity with something from the past, and maybe you will be more likely to stick with it. So I often get the question, what's the best thing that I can be doing? And there is no one single activity. If the admissions committee offered 1, 2, or 3 activities, everyone would do them, and then we wouldn't have a differentiated candidate. So really just lean into what you like and what you think you can stick with to bolster that side of your candidacy. And the last one, if you have no business experience or you're a non-traditional candidate, this is another opportunity where, a business course from UCLA or UC Berkeley Extension might be useful to kind of just show that you can handle the coursework and that, you are ready to, start the program and, incorporate that knowledge into your future career. So with that, I just want to underscore, you are starting early, and keep in mind that this is a marathon, not a sprint. Allow yourself the training and the prep that this MBA application process really deserves. With that, I am going to transition into Q&A. We do offer services here at TTP that will help you, with many of the things that I talked about. So that information is on our website, but I also want to offer you the opportunity to have a free consultation. So if you want to talk about your situation and, some of the things that you can be doing and, see if you're a fit for our services, bring your questions, right? Reach out to me. This is how you reach me directly. You can also go through our website, but that will take you down a chain of conversations. So, if you want to talk to me personally, send me an email and we will schedule a time to talk through some of the elements of your situation and your plan. I will pause for a second. Please use the chat. I am happy to take questions for a couple minutes, and happy to lend advice or at least commentary to some of the situations on your minds. So I got a question about a layoff. The question is, how can one offset a few years of experience, 1.5 to 2 years post-college, if you're recently affected by a layoff? So I'm sorry that that happened to you. Unfortunately, it's quite common, right, with all of the dynamics of the job market now. A lot of layoffs, a lot of change, and it used to be the case where not having a job and applying to business school was a huge red flag, but thankfully things have changed, and admissions committees really understand that it's not always possible, right? Like, it is tough to find a job. So they relaxed their thinking on that, especially around the pandemic. I would say stay active, right? You're going to have to stay active in your job search. If you are applying in round one and you find yourself searching for a job now, you're going to stay active with the job search because you still have almost, a year to work still to gain experience and, to bolster your experience to meet that, class profile. Again, that's an average, but want it to be sort of in the ballpark of the years of experience there. But also, keep up with your other activities, right? Admissions committees understand that you can't be looking for a job 10 hours a day. But you can be diligent, intentional about your job search, active with that while you keep up other activities like your extracurriculars, volunteering, things like that. They are not too interested in hearing about candidates who quit their jobs and do nothing but apply for an MBA. So I highly recommend that you don't do that. Because guess what? Your competition is still working, still doing all of the things and applying for top MBA programs on top of that. So I hope that starts to answer your question. Any other questions or things on your mind tonight? I got a question about HBS Core. Yes, I actually just recently wrote a blog post on this, but HBS Core is also a program that you can use to supplement your coursework and create an alternate transcript. It is more expensive than the extension courses, so that's why I don't always recommend it. But, you do have the time now, and, if you're willing to make that investment, I think it's a great option to create that alternate transcript. One question about EMBA, thoughts on MBA versus EMBA? Great question. So the MBA traditionally takes people out of the workforce for 2 years, and it's a big investment. However, if you have more experience, if you are, 8, 10, 12 years experience, and of course you'll have to look at the class profiles and the requirements of each program to see, what they're actually looking for. But if you are farther along in your career, the EMBA might be a good choice. It enables you to keep working, stay in a job that you like, and be among peers from, a similar background. So in other words, like the EMBA really is for people who are, who have ascended to leadership roles, like, it's more strategic conversations, less appropriate for people who are switching careers, but, great option if you are, on the path you want to be, in a job you want to be, and don't want to take tiers away from earning income. Does corporate healthcare qualify as a non-traditional pre-MBA field? It kind of depends on what you are doing. Healthcare is an increasingly popular focus in the MBA, so uh, I don't think it's like too non-traditional really, but it is kind of less common than someone say coming from consulting or coming from banking. So I think, especially if you want to like continue in healthcare or use that industry experience in some way in your future career, I think it is a differentiator, which is great for your candidacy. I got a question about letters of recommendation, and I think this is a good one because like this is an area that causes angst among many candidates. Um, it is really tough to, broach this conversation, especially when many of the top MBA programs ask for recommendations from your current supervisor. That's totally awkward, right? This I work on with clients all the time, one-on-one, because it really helps to understand the context and that they're coming from and understand, the working relationship and understand whether it's a good idea. It's not always a good idea. If it's something that will jeopardize your relationship or potentially your employment, I would encourage you to go, back in time a little bit and ask a former supervisor. If you have a good working relationship, I think it does help to, have an initial conversation about your career goals and, how the MBA fits in. And then a future conversation on a more kind of tactical level that, provides them with support and some context and some examples that, set them up for success for the letters of recommendation. So I provided a little bit of a high level view of that process, but it is something that I worked through tactically with my clients. I think that takes care of all of the questions that I have in the chat. But if we didn't get to your question and you want more one-on-one time, drop me a line. Happy to set something up. Hope this was useful for you guys, and I really appreciate your thoughtful questions and your engagement. Hope to see you on a future session, and have a great night and rest of your week.